Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm Mike Evans. Good times right now with the Avalanche as we're talking. It's the Monday after that fantastic win over the Edmonton Oilers. I've talked about this at times during the Nuggets season, and it also applies to the Avalanche season. When you have two teams, and let's talk about the Avs specifically here. When you have an Avalanche team that we all know is going to be a playoff team, we all expect to go deep into the playoffs and really have a chance to compete for a Stanley Cup. Let's face it, the long 82-game season, sometimes it's hard to get fired up for it. It's a grind. It's a grind for the players. It could be a grind for us as fans because there's a lot of hurry up and let's get this over with and let's get to the playoffs, right? But along the way, there are certain games that stand out. There are certain games that, you know what? It's still the regular season, but this is one I'm circling. This is one I'm looking forward to because it's going to have a playoff-type feel to it. And that Edmonton game on Saturday certainly had that. You had the build-up, an Avalanche team that already was considered a strong team, but only looking stronger with the moves that they made since the trade deadline. An Edmonton team that got off to that horrible start, fired their coach, and has been red hot since then. So you had that as a backdrop. You've got Connor McDavid against Nathan MacKinnon, and the idea that arguably the two best players in hockey are squaring off against each other. So you put it all together, Saturday night in Canada, fast ice surface in Edmonton, and it was just go. And you could tell that both teams were really up for this game and that it was a playoff-style game. And Jared Bednar commenting after the game how fast the game went. You know, it's one of those things like you look at the clock, you're like, wow, the game's, almost over. It's going by that quickly because very few whistles, just a tremendous pace, tremendous skating, and it was a joy to watch. And as a fan, you really cling to those kind of games because over the course of the Big 82, as I like to call them, not many of those games stand out, and this one did. So it was, first of all, a good showcase of hockey. It got you even more excited about the idea of the playoffs coming here very, very soon. Let's get on with it. But what did we learn from this game against Edmonton? If indeed it was a playoff-style game, if indeed it was a potential Western Conference final preview, for example, what did we learn? Well, a couple things. One, we learned that the moves that the Avalanche made at the trade deadline just continue to look like they are going to bear fruit. These moves make us feel confident that this team did the right thing at the trade deadline and that the moves are going to work out and make this team a serious Stanley Cup threat. I look at, in particular, and you kind of, you walk it all back, and when they decided to trade Bo Byram, if the idea was in order to make the Casey Middlestat deal, you had to be able to dangle Bo Byram. I give the Avalanche a lot of credit for being able to make that other move to be able to make the Bo Byram move work, and that was the acquisition of Sean Walker. And you go into this as a team saying, and this is why identity is so important, or a system. We've had a lot of debates about, you look at the Broncos, for example, right? Sean Payton trying to implement his system. An argument can be made that, hey, look, dude, it's not about implementing your system. It's about coaching to what you have. Well, I would push back on that because I think if you look at the Avalanche, it's clear, based on the success that they've had, that they've built a pretty good idea of what their system is, what their identity is, what kind of player they're looking for. So when it came time to open themselves up to the possibility of trading a Bo Byram, fine, we can do that. But in order to do that, it can't just be, here you go, take Bo Byram out of the equation and not really find a way to replace him. Because sure, maybe you're going to go out and use Bo Byram to strengthen one other part of your team, but are you severely weakening another part of your team? The whole rob Peter to pay Paul type thing. What made the Avs moves, at least for now, look so shrewd is that they make the move for Sean Walker. And right from the get-go, right when they traded for Sean Walker, and guys like Chris McFarland or Jared Bednar were asked about what does Sean Walker bring? Immediately what you heard was he fits with our style of defenseman. Playmaking, offensive-minded, great skating defenseman. And so the idea was we're not sure if we're going to be able to find somebody that gives us an equal value replacing Bo Byram, but we're going to at least come close so that the drop-off isn't that noticeable. I think if you look at that Edmonton game, you saw why the Avalanche liked the idea of Sean Walker. 2 goals and 2 different offensive-minded goals. One, he comes down, roaring down the slot, and just makes a goal scorer's goal, right? That's an offensive defenseman's scoring type goal. And then the second goal, the instincts, being able to read the play and be ready to jump in with an offensive approach as a defenseman, coming in late and being in a position to score. Not the classic stay-at-home defenseman who's anchored to the blue line. This is a guy who is looking to jump. And so what you saw there was what the Avs envisioned in Walker, how he could replace or at least come close to replacing or maybe even surpassing what they were getting from Bo Byram, and then allowing them to use Byram as the trade chip to bring in Casey Middlestat. Middlestat with an assist on one of the goals. So you're seeing the moves, the trades, and what they're bringing on display right there. The other thing, too, is, you talk about MacKinnon versus McDavid. And I know that for most of the hockey world, they've been, enraptured with the idea of Connor McDavid. But all I know as an Avalanche observer and you as an Avalanche fan is that, I don't know, for all the talk about McDavid, it seems like whenever the Avs go up against the Oilers or whenever MacKinnon goes up against McDavid, McKinnon's the better player. And McDavid kind of is, if not invisible, he's just kind of another guy out there. Look at the other night. No points, -1, 5 shots on goal. MacKinnon had an assist, +1, 6 shots on goal, and his team won. And it's something that we've seen between the Avalanche and the Oilers, between MacKinnon and McDavid throughout their head-to-head matchups. So, yeah, I know that you got plenty of people out there that are trying to make this a now maybe a 2-horse race, and McDavid's coming in late steam and a late run for the Hart Trophy. I don't know. I think Saturday night was yet another clear reminder of who the best player in hockey is and who should win the Hart Trophy, and it should be Nathan MacKinnon. Some other things. When the Avs came out of the trade deadline and I was doing this podcast here with you, I ticked off 3 to-do items on my little Avalanche to-do list that I wanted to see happen before they were ready to go into the playoffs, and I could, feel really good about this team going into the playoffs. Number 1 was getting Val Nichushkin back to the level that he was pre-player assistant entering the program Val. That Val was a beast. That Val was a point-per-game guy. My first question was, based on the importance of Val and what he's meant to this team from a win-loss record, the numbers back it up, was how quickly could you get Val back to being Val? Good news is it looks like he's picked right up where he left off, which is fantastic. So that's check 1. Number 2 was get the new acquisitions up to speed as quickly as possible. That one's still, there's a still to be determined about that, but you can't argue with the early results. Just a few games into this new look Avalanche team. There's still more to be done, but you can only go by what you're seeing to this point, and you have to grade on a curve, understanding these guys have only been here together for a few games. So you can only go based on what you've seen to this point in terms of what am I seeing versus what the realistic expectations are for a group of guys that are being thrown together for only a few games. And I have to say what you're seeing to this point is very encouraging. And you got to like it, and you got to feel very upbeat about where this thing is going to continue to go and how it's going to continue to build upward over these final 15 games or so. And onward and inward to the playoffs. So you got to feel good about that. Number 3 was, hey, the Avalanche need to start to develop a better road record, a better road performance, a better road attitude, more confidence, more swagger on the road. Because let's face it, after starting the season 4-0 on the road, the Avs were a well below 500, not well below, but you know what I mean. They were a below 500 road team that really didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence away from Ball Arena for most of this season. Since the trade deadline and since the moves have been made, this road trip, 3-0 to start the road trip, and so a belief that, hey, this team maybe is starting to develop something that translates well away from home. It's funny when we talked about both the Avs and Nuggets about playoffs and where to finish and seeding and home ice, home court, all that. Honestly, when it comes to the Nuggets, I don't care who they play, where they play them. I don't think a team can beat the Nuggets 4 times. So whether or not they have home court advantage, I'm not sure it really matters. With the Avs, yeah, I think home ice does matter a little bit more because when you look at going on the road and winning in the playoffs, I know winning on the road in the hockey playoffs is easier and happens more than it happens in the NBA. But still, there is something about the idea of being able to play at home and that little safety net that you have at the beginning of a series to know that you have home ice. And I just think that up until this road trip with the Avs, just haven't inspired a whole lot of confidence about them on the road. That's why the start of this road trip, 3-0 so far, is very encouraging. And I can't also help but think if this thing works out the way we hope it does with another parade, I think we'll look back on it. I know I will. The underrated schedule of what was happening around this trade deadline. Because if these trade acquisitions turn out to be so impactful that it clearly makes the difference in them being able to win a Stanley Cup, a couple things that happened right off that trade deadline. One, they had like a 3-day break, which allowed them a couple of days of practice. And practice time this late in the season is a precious commodity. The coaches lament the fact that they don't have enough of. So the fact that they were able to throw these guys into a couple of good practices, get their legs underneath them, get them a chance to get acclimated to the way the Avalanche like to do things is important rather than just jumping into another game. Secondly, I think the road trip was a big deal. I think we'll look back on this road trip as coming at a real opportune time for this team because there's something about the idea of just getting out on the road, and it's just us. It's just us as a group, and the whole focus is on hockey. New guys coming in, they don't have to be worried about what's going on at home and school systems and making sure the cable's plugged in and all that kind of stuff. They don't have to deal with any of it. They're out on the road. They're with their new teammates. It gives them a chance to spend all kinds of time together at the rink, away from the rink, on the buses, on the planes, at dinners, having a couple of pops at night. It just gives everybody a chance to really come together. And I think this road trip has really afforded them that opportunity. So I think it came at a crucial time. It worked out really well. And so it's just an underrated part of what's going on with the Avs right now that I think we may look back on and say, yeah, that was a small but not, insignificant key in what the Avalanche were ultimately able to accomplish. We shall see, but fantastic night of hockey on Saturday. Good performance by the Avs. No complaints right now with the way they're playing. We'll see if they keep it going this week. They'll be in St. Louis, and we'll have a chance to talk about the rest of the week a little bit later on in the week. But all's good right now. Keep it rolling. The Big 82, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The playoffs are closer now than certainly they've looked for a long part of this season. So I think I speak for all of you. Let's get on with the playoffs. Starting to feel really excited about what this team is going to be able to do come playoff time. In the meantime, we'll talk to you again later in the week here on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.